All right, we are live on Live and Unscript. I'm the ambassador, and I have the honor of having Shane Cleveland on my podcast tonight. And so, before we get started, I'm gonna let him introduce himself, and then we're just gonna get into it.
Yeah, it's great to be talking with you. As as you mentioned, my name is Shane Cleveland. I'm from Bremerton, Washington, same town here as Coach Ashley. And very recently, I donated a kidney to the great Nate Robinson.
Wow. Now, I had to go and read the story, and one of the things you're a UW fan, so how
Yeah,
cool is it in the sense if you want to say a UW fan and he's one of the biggest names that come out of UW and what like how did you find out that you was a match?
right. Well, that's a big part of it. I mean, obviously, just my familiarity with Nate begins with being a UW fan, and
Okay.
having followed him from the time he was really more than anything a football recruit for the university back in early 2000s, late 90s, um, and most memorably, watching him play as a freshman, starting on the football team as a cornerback. And I've said it several times, and I know I'm not alone. But selfishly, I wish he'd kept playing football because he was incredible, just fun to watch. But
Okay.
thankfully, the same was true on the basketball court, uh, and obviously he had a great career there at UW, and was really a big part of making the basketball team relevant again with Coach Romar and some of his teammates that were local guys too. Brandon Roy, Will Conroy, those guys. And then it was hard not to keep tabs on him even after his UW career because he did great things in the NBA and in particular with the three slam dunk
Yeah.
championships. Yeah, and so it was last year in 2024, the UW football spring game. I was there with my kids and cousin and their kids, and um, they start flashing Nate's highlights up on the big video screen, and I was kind of aware of his health situation, but this was the first that they were talking about looking for a kidney donor, and that's what they mentioned in this video presentation. And ultimately, at the end of that, they said they were looking for an A positive blood donor, blood
Okay.
type kidney donor, and that's my blood type, and I knew that, and it immediately struck a chord with me. Just a sort of feeling that I can't really explain, and you don't necessarily even expect. Where I just immediately knew exactly what I was going to do, and um, to add some very important context to that is the reason that certainly got me at least halfway to that immediate decision was the fact that my wife had donated a kidney 14 years ago. So she's a living kidney donor, and her recipient is here in town with us.
Oh
Um,
wow.
was someone that we didn't know, that she didn't know at the time, but to kind of bring this connection home to you, Coach Ashley, is it was your player, Ella's preschool teacher, who was
Oh wow.
asking for a kidney donation because she didn't have anyone in her immediate circle who was able to do that for her. And Kara has talked about how she had that same feeling where as soon as she learned that it was shared on social media, um, that she immediately knew that she wanted to attempt that. And we can kind of get into what that involves, but ultimately that was successful 14 years ago, and her recipient continues to do well, and they just had their first child. Um,
Uh-huh.
they're a big part of our lives. Um, she's asked Kara and myself to be the godparents to their child, and um, Sharina, her recipient, is the godmother of our third child, who was born after Kara donated her kidney. So, it was something that I was very familiar with. I knew the impact, of course, that it would have on the recipient. And it also had a huge impact on our family, a positive impact. And um, I was very familiar and comfortable with the process. She also donated at UW Medical Center, so I know how incredible they are and the good work and amazing people that they are. So yeah, that of course, it played a huge role um, in me just being ready in that situation to accept that opportunity. Um, and
The
and so
process.
yeah,
I'm sorry. You were saying the process. What is the process like? Like,
yep, yep. And so they asked, immediately for people to reach out through a web link um, to provide some initial basic information, and that's really where that starts. Is there's some real basic requirements for both your own personal health and your family's health history that they need to go through. So in addition to initially being a blood type match, some real basic questions about my health. Of course, my age and health history, and then with my family, what sort of health history is there. Of course, wanting to rule out any possibility that there'd be kidney disease in my health history or in my family's history, and then just ensuring that there's good health for the recipient. Now, of course, I wasn't alone. There was many people that offered to donate to Nate, and I've heard in the thousands potentially even. Um,
wow.
and and I'd like to think that my wife, having been a kidney donor herself, which is something I absolutely mentioned in terms of why is this something I'd consider, likely played a role as well. Um, and so I think it took them a while to kind of weed through a lot of the applicants, and ultimately they asked me to submit, make sure I'd had a recent physical and allow them access to that information. And then I think a couple months later, it took a couple months, I got a phone call, asking if I was still interested, and then some more in-depth questions. And then I did the first big tests were here locally. They had me have my blood drawn. They took a lot of blood, did a lot of tests, all the routine stuff plus more. And then I always like to mention that they had me collect my urine for 24 hours in a big jug. And they tested that, and all of that cleared. And in addition to that, there was an additional. I don't know all the medical details, but there's they call it a cross match test, that in addition to being a blood type match, just to make sure that there's a tissue match, more so to make sure that there wouldn't be an extreme risk for the recipient's body to reject
Okay.
my kidney. Um, and from there was a lot of Zoom calls, everyone from a psychologist, a nutritionist, to all the way up to the surgeon. That took several weeks, and then eventually going to UW Medical Center, where they did, some of the more intensive stuff, more blood tests, CT scan. They had me do a couple extra things with my family history around heart condition. Um, and everything just, while it took 9 months, that whole process
Wow.
from the point when I actually donated,
Okay.
incredibly thorough, but everything just really fell into place in so many ways. Um, all along the way, of course, I'm thinking in the back of my head, well, this might not work out. Who knows? That might not be an exact match. I might have something going on that they'll find that I didn't know about. Uh, kind of a defense mechanism for, I have to be ready for this to, at some point end. Um, though my wife all along was like, no, you're it. That's it. You're the one. I think I kind of thought that in the back of my head, but I needed to put up some guards for myself. And so at one point it was, I think in around Thanksgiving time, I was told, okay, you're done with all your tests. We feel comfortable with you as a donor for Nate. Um, but he was still having to get some things checked out and done. And he tells a story that he found out right around Christmas, that they had a recipient, that they had a donor, and were ready to go. And I had told them that February 7th would be an acceptable date for us. So they were able to give him that news and that date of when he would be getting a new kidney, right around Christmas. Um, and yeah, and he didn't know me, up until after I actually donated.
Well, I'm sure, uh, and maybe one day I'll be able to get him on and hear his side as well. But I know to hear that news, right? That right there, especially they say around Christmas time, the greatest gift that
That's
he could have imagined.
Mhm.
you know I had a chance to see I've seen Nate around, of course, because of course I'm in the basketball world, and
Yep.
I've coached over in the pro am and things like that, and so I followed his story as well, and I know they was talking about how time was, if you want to say, really ticking down, and trying to find something, and I know I had Baby Shaq, one of the big street ball legends. He was somebody that came up last year, and he was like, "Man, I want to meet him. I give him my kidney." So it was so many people I started to hear that wanted to donate, and then when we saw, my wife and I saw the story. And then to find out, I was like, whoa, Shane, Ella, this is right here, like I said, in my backyard. This is like family. Been at the games, and this is gonna be pretty cool. So I was like, told my wife, I'm just reaching out to Shane and see if I can get him on. I don't know what his schedule is like, because I'm sure your life has changed. I mean, since I see you and Nate on all kind of things, right? So I'm sure there's a lot of media, a lot of things that are sort of happening. I know your Instagram is.
That's fun. That was a real big. That was a fun part of all this, for sure.
Yes, so I mean, how was it, as far as the recovery and recovery process, and just your family? I know that was a big part, of
Mhm.
why you gave, and you're here. But how has was that road, the recovery from everything?
Yeah, it's a great question. Um, uh, in retrospect, I can say, everything went really to the way that they told me it would.
Yeah.
Uh, which I was just really, really, really thankful for. They of course go over all of the potential risks, which there certainly are. Um, uh, they arm you with all the information that you will need about what to expect, um, um, what can go wrong, and how rare it is for complications. I'll certainly mention. Um, but I went according to the plan that they laid out, which was, surgeries on a Friday, and I left the hospital on Monday.
Oh, wow.
And in that time, they start you out on a catheter so they can measure everything, for your remaining kidney. Um, so then within around 24 to 48 hours, that gets removed. And, from there, they're really just keeping track of, my vitals, start walking around. And that's the big thing they encourage is, being mobile. And, I was never in much discomfort. It was more just, being careful with the incisions. Um, they run a few tests in the hospital there, but there's, um, again, it's just kind of making sure that there's nothing, really out of line. Um, I took the next full week off of work, recuperating at home, and that's the big part. We're having a good support system, plays a big role. I knew I had that going into it. Um, and that was a huge help. Just my wife and kids and family, friends. Um, I work for my in-laws, who and so coworkers and everybody, making sure that it was um, that I didn't have to worry about work at all. So I took that whole first week off and just did a lot of walking and resting. Um, and I think by middle of the next week, I was antsy to start doing some things to get back to work, and just kind of ramping up the activity. Um, I went back to the hospital at 2 weeks, and they did some tests then, again, just to make sure nothing was out of whack, and everything looked great. And so they don't even want to see me again until 6 months,
Nice.
which is honestly starting to come up a little bit. That's in about 2 months. Uh, but there was I'd say at the for in between 4 and 6 weeks, I felt really normal, and it was just up through 6 to 8 weeks that they really put restrictions on me. Again, primarily just in terms of lifting and protecting the incisions.
Okay.
And a lot of people ask, what does it feel like? Can you tell there's a kidney missing? Nothing like that. Like I would never know. Not at all.
Okay.
Yeah. Um, yeah, it's incredible.
Wow. No, and like I said, with your wife going through it first, I'm sure that, like you said, played a major, and that was a big part of
Yeah.
not only the decision, but even your process of you recovering and what you're going through now, because y'all went through this together. And so, I mean, I'm sure that has brought y'all closer together, in some kind of form or fashion. How long have you been married? If you don't
Yeah,
mind asking.
we got married back in 2006, so almost 20 years now.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow. And you
Yeah.
have three daughters?
We have four beautiful
Four.
daughters.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so with the process, I mean, two times, not just not just yours, because it doesn't matter if it was, because we just say, okay, Nate Robinson, this big name, and someone whose name may not be as big, it doesn't matter. A life is a life, right? And so, how has that, I think, for your girls and just your family, how has that encouraged or affected them in some kind of way?
Yeah, I mean, it certainly has. Like I mentioned, my wife's recipient is here in town, and she became a big part of our life. She's family to us, and um, so they've always had that connection with her. Um, and so they're very familiar with it. Um, that there was, a little bit going into it where we talked a lot with our kids, of course, and um, we even talked to my wife's recipient. They came over for dinner like the week before, and like, this is really different. This is weird. We don't know Nate. We don't know.
Right.
Um, we don't really know how to feel about this. Um, so it was great to be able to have those discussions, uh, and to talk about why this is something that is important to us, um, to why it's something we feel called to do, um, and we can only hope that it has a positive impact, not just on our kids, but anybody who hears the
Yeah.
story. There's a lot of people who know my wife's story as well, and that's inspired a lot of people. People go out of their way who know my wife's story as well to talk about how much they appreciate that, um, and enjoy that story. Obviously, it is a little bit different having Nate being a well-known person. Um,
Right.
uh, I got a lot of um, just so many people reaching out and saying amazing and kind things. Um, and that's great to have. That, it justified my decision in so many ways, and reinforces, um, why why it's nice to just do good things for other people.
Right.
Um, and I think our kids see that, and it was an important step to go from that. We don't know this guy, and we don't know what the outcome's going to be, or what if any way will be connected with him in the future.
Right.
To then, when they were able to meet him and he was able to express his gratitude and talk to them, um, uh, yeah, it's hard to describe. Yeah, um, it's had a huge impact on them, and I think the way that they go about navigating, um, opportunities like that in their lives too.
Yeah, no, I can only imagine, like you said, from someone that you're close to, especially like say in our community, we're pretty close knit, small community. And so then someone you don't know, even if it is a big name, you don't know that person, right? And so being able to still give, like you said, a part of yourself that is going to give them an opportunity to live. That's what another reason why I was just like, it's an amazing story. Yes, it's Nate Robinson. And I didn't know about your wife's story until I read about your story. Then I'm like, oh wow, you know what I mean? It makes it even more amazing just to
It
hear
really
the
does.
story, and so I've seen some pictures or things that I guess you can say interviews that you and him have been on. So how have that relationship, like it seemed like now y'all are become family as well, because I saw that he's like, hey, it's my brother, my hero, guardian angel type deal. So this situation have brought y'all closer, would you say?
Yeah. You mean in terms of Nate? Of
Yeah, 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 Nate.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so yeah, like I said, I didn't meet him until after the donation, and of course, there's a lot of discussion about that beforehand, um, with my, donation team. Um, I had to be okay with, um, not having any form of a relationship.
Right.
And that was my take on it. Was always like, well, that's going to be his decision. I'm
Yeah.
making this decision now, and anything that happens beyond this is up to him. And he's talked about how he got the impression that I wanted to remain anonymous to a certain extent, um, which that wasn't necessarily the case. I didn't want to be anonymous to him, but if that's the way that he wanted it to proceed, then I was okay with that too. So yeah, there was no guarantees of how that was going to go, when we would meet, if we would meet. Um, However, again, knowing this situation, obviously we're both in the operating room at the same time, uh,
Right.
different operating rooms, but there's one waiting room, and that's where the families are. And then there's one floor that we're both on, recovering for several days. And my wife was able to meet his family, while we were both in surgery, um, which, she has an incredible story of approaching them and
Oh,
gifting,
wow.
some pottery that my daughter had made, wanting it to go to Nate. And they said, "Wait a second, who are you?" And they just embraced her, and
Wow.
immediately we're like, "Okay, we're family." And um, my parents and kids showed up, and they were just having a little party out there. Uh, and as soon as I came out of the operating room, Nate's mom, his grandmother, um, and I believe an aunt or sister were there, and immediately his mom grabbed my hand and said, "You're my son now too." Uh,
Wow.
and that was, obviously I was, in a different state at that time, but, even just thinking back on it is, emotional, and
Yeah.
it's just an incredible thing. And they got to meet Nate. My family got to meet Nate before me because I couldn't leave my bed for a little bit, but um, uh, they had, yeah, a great experience getting to meet Nate initially. And the next day, I took my catheter and walker down the hallway and met Nate for the first time. And um, he hasn't stopped thanking me since. And um,
Wow.
uh, he had a great. Again, he got to talk to my kids. He had a great speech for them about how much this meant to him and the opportunities that he was looking forward to having with his kids, and
Wow.
his goal of being a grandfather one day. And that meant a lot to me to have him share that sentiment with my kids.
Yeah.
And yeah, so Nate and his whole family, have just been, nothing but supportive and welcoming. Um, we text back and forth quite a bit. Um, we've we've gotten to we've gotten to see each other several times since then, and we've got some things planned. Just events in our lives, and it's I mean it certainly, tenfold or more increases the joy of this opportunity. It certainly wasn't, like I said, it wasn't guaranteed. It wasn't the point of it. Um,
Right.
but it's, especially to be able to see him, um, doing things with his kids, being able um, to be involved in their lives and his family's lives and for his career. And, just being able to see him flourish is, um, I can't put to words.
Yeah. I'm like, just honestly listening to it, I'm just like, in awe, right? Because it's like, wow. I mean, outsider myself, like I said, as a basketball in the community that him and I share, and watching and hearing the story and seeing his still coming out when he can and being around his kids because they play and things
Yep.
like that. And I could only, imagine, what I mean, where it's like, okay, I'm on a timeline, right? And there's so many things I would like to do. That's with anybody with their family. And then you get that hope back. You get that opportunity to say, you know what, something that was real close to being cut short. Now I have a chance to experience those things. And so, like I said, just listening to it, I'm trying not to, get too emotional myself because it's one of those you just like, man, just hearing both sides or watching him from afar, hearing the story and the things that you're able to experience. And like you said, with your heart was not because of who he was or, trying to, as people say, fame or anything like that. Is this is something that my wife had done, was an example of seeing it. I wanted to be able to give back, and I was able to give back. And in that process, I gained a brother, as he says in the thing. We gained a family, and that's why I wanted to have the interview, because the story it's different reading the story, but when you actually hear it, from the person who's a part of it, it brings a different light. And that's what it was, where I was like, man, I can't wait to hear this. I want to hear, the things that you've been able to go through and experience thus far. And I know it's still, like I say, more to come. Um, and just what blesses me is just from the heart. It's not, I'm I'm not trying to get all these Instagram likes, and I'm not trying to, what I mean? Like a lot of folks, let me claim the fame. It's just like, no, it's just love,
Yeah,
and
yeah, that's been the biggest reward for sure, is the human connection uh,
yeah,
that's come with it. And that's the community that you talk about. You know, uh, Well, certainly community brought me to it, and kind of selfishly for me, yeah, it was this UW community. This was something that has been part of my life since I was a kid. My dad's a UW alum and has had season tickets to the Husky games for 50 plus years. So that was, a big part of my life growing up, and it's extended into my adulthood. And now I share that with my kids too. And um, it's very rewarding to be able to feel like I've contributed now in some way to that community, to somebody who is beloved by so many UW fans. Um, I think some of that gets lost these days, and with the whole the NIL and the transfer portal, which I support the opportunity for kids to have all of that stuff come their way. I think it's a great thing. Um, but I also just hope that we don't lose some of that, the soul of it, where there's things other than just money or just playing time that I think can come along with being part of a community, really. And
Yeah.
especially for somebody like UW is lucky to have in hometown people like Nate, and you can continue to see it in the basketball community that you're talking about, where um, Jamal Crawford, Brandon Roy,
Yeah.
uh, they're coaching their kids teams.
Yeah.
They're still involved in the community and out there at events and helping in so many ways, with time, with money, with resources. And so to be able um, to learn a little bit more about that and to see so much of it, especially on social media and things, um, it's pretty incredible to see how there are so many people out there giving back and contributing. You're in the same position, working with kids and offering them these opportunities, um, and it's something that's bigger than any one of us, and it's really rewarding to be a part of and to learn more about.
Yeah, no, it is. It's one of the, like I said, I say, been blessed over the last 13 years, past decade, to be involved in the community and with the kids and to watch them grow up and, be young adults and just see how it's bigger than the game, right? And so that's been just one of the biggest blessings I can say for myself. And like I said, I go across the water, I see all of these guys you're talking about, if it's not coaching against or something
Mhm.
like that, being able to play because I was coaching in the Jamal Crawford League at one time. And so it's just those things where, like I said, just watching at every level these men and women giving back to their communities, giving back to the kids, and being an example. And it's bigger than just, like I said, seeing it on TV is actually they're really touching lives, and so it's been an honor for myself to be in that circle and to even be mentioned. Like I said, when I messaged you and you was like, "Oh yeah, you coach my niece," and I was like, "Wow, you don't realize." Like myself, the impact that you have sometimes, right? And who's watching.
Yep.
And so it's those things later where you begin to be like, for me, I'd be humbled to be like, oh, wow, I just do it because I love it, but not understanding the impact and the relationships that it creates. And so it's a amazing thing. So tell me about, okay, so you're a boat. I was looking at it. You love boats, right? But
Right.
then
Yeah.
uh, you because I was reading the article, but then you got into IT. That's what you do with your family's company, all right? So
Mhm.
what happened? How did you get into the IT world, or was that? But you still like remodel or work on boats or what?
Yeah, that's a hobby. Yeah, for my
Okay,
work. Yeah, for my work, working for my wife's family's business
okay,
uh, at Bennett Corporation, where we make neoprene medical products. And after my wife and I got married, she had an opportunity to come we lived down in Vancouver where I worked in journalism. Um, that's what I went to school for, and I worked
Okay.
in that field for a few years. And I was down in Vancouver, but Kara is she is a math teacher, and so when she graduated and was getting into finding a job, she had an opportunity to come back up to Bremerton to work at Olympic High School, where she graduated from. And so we had to take that opportunity, and we certainly welcomed coming home. And so I was in between things, and Bennick was able to put some of my um, writing talents to use initially. But that was so that was, yeah, 19 years ago. And being a family business, you just, it's what needs being done, what holes need to be filled. And um, so I do a lot of different things. But yeah, a big part has become being involved in keeping the technology running
Okay.
at the company. Um, and so it's a lot of fun. Um, I love what I get to do there. I get to do a lot of different things, and looking forward to that still going. And um, but yeah, the boating is a hobby. Again, it's another thing that I grew up doing with my family,
Okay.
and still today, a lot of family and friends have boats, live on the water, and so just a way to stay connected with that. And you know, I got into it by picking up some boats that needed some love, and spent a lot of time getting those ready, um, and getting them on the water. And that was that kind of I love that it gets the attention that it's getting, because that was when I first got to meet Nate. He said, "If you have an Instagram, let me know what it is, because I'm going to make you famous here, basically." I said, "Well, yeah, I do have one, but the only reason I really had social media was so that I could be in tune with these boating communities,
Okay.
and other hobbyists who are doing the same thing I was doing, but they're posting about it, and they're putting up pictures and tutorials and things that I wanted to get in touch with to help me in my process." And so I never posted anything. I didn't have any followers. Um, and so Nate saw my Instagram and said, "Oh no, you got to. It looks like it's private. You need to make it public." And I said, "No, it's public. I've just never posted anything. That's why it looks like it's private."
Right.
So I went into my album, and I've got some favorite pictures of my kids, but I have more favorite pictures of my boats. And so I found one that I liked, and that was my first post, was a picture of my boat. And I said, "Well, I hope all my new followers out there like boats, because you're going to start to see some of that." So that kind of took on a life of its own, but that's another fun part of it.
So, how many do you have boats? Like, how
Yeah,
many?
well, so I happen to have two at the moment. One
Okay.
is it's a Boston Whaler. It's a 1965, and I restored that one really from the ground up. Um, it fits the whole family, but it's a little tight for us, and to be able to go on longer adventures. So a couple years ago, I also purchased a larger boat. Didn't need quite as much work, but different kind of work. And this will be the first full year we'll be able to use that one. Uh,
Okay.
and it will, yeah, it's a little comfier, a little more room. We'll be able to go a little further. The goal is to go do some sailgating over at Husky Stadium.
Okay.
That one. Though they just released the football schedule for the first few games, when it's still nice out, and
Yeah.
they're 8 p.m. games. And so to be able to take the boat over at that time is a little disappointing. But uh, yeah, and Kara's family are boaters, and my family are boaters.
Okay.
So, yeah, it's something that it's just fun to be a part of.
Okay. See, I didn't know that, so I'm gonna have to really tap in with y'all, and so we can get on a boat.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
yeah. Could join y'all on a boat, and because I must say, yeah. Last time I was at the graduation, I was at the cookout at the party, of
yeah,
course,
yeah, yeah,
with with the family. But the boat, I think that's definitely ideal. I was watching, like I said, going through your little photos and saw some how you restored some boats and like things like that. I was like, oh, it's pretty nice. So,
Yeah.
so it went from, you said your Instagram went from basically zero to I think it's like 40 some K now. It's
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah. I think at one time it was up to 42,000, but it only goes up when Nate posts something about me, and then it starts to drop back down again, which is it's understandable, right?
Right. No, I mean, like you said, hey, he's gonna make you famous, right? And that's the power of influence, right? Like I said, when I went to your page, I'm like, whoa, 40, yeah, yeah, they said 42. I said, okay. But then, you said Nate, definitely understand.
Yeah.
Well,
So I'm getting to do the same thing for my family on a much smaller scale. For friends and family, I say, hey, look, I'll post this picture, and then you can see how many likes and views and everything.
no, that's true, right? So I mean, I can say even like when I was saying, "Hey, I'm about to do an interview with you" and things like that, it gets a lot of attention, right? It's like everybody, yes, we know who Shane is. Yes, there's Nate Robinson, Fred, and
Cool.
and so it's pretty cool. And that I knew I was like, okay, I feel like this is gonna be one of my best interviews, right? And a lot of people is gonna want to listen, and so, of course, I'm excited to be able to share it to the world, put it on the radio, and let other people hear the other side. Just, I mean, and I say the other side is from you, from our small community, because everybody's saying, "Hey, Bremerton, there's nothing really happening. There's nothing. It's our own little community over here." And so I think that that's the cool part is just showing just the love that we do share in our community and how it's been spread to the whole world.
That's right.
And so I want to say thank you, Shane. I ain't going to hold you up, but I am going to hold you on the boat ride. So I'm going to be contacting you, figure out so we can get on the boat together. But I want to say thank you, for just not only coming on, but you supporting me, Ella, the team, everybody back when I was coaching Ella at CK when we had that state run. That was pretty fun.
That was
Um, and so, and I know she's doing very well. I got to see what school is she's at now because I know she
uh,
did.
she just got a full ride scholarship to a school. I think it's D2 down in Northern California.
Yes.
Yeah, so she's all set up for a little while.
Yes, no, I love her game. I just was like, okay, I'm just waiting. So this is great to hear she has a full ride and she's going to continue to play. So I'm gonna have to get with the family again and try to catch one of those games and
Yeah,
because I'm thinking she should be home. Is she home now?
she's home right now.
Okay, she is home. Okay, so all right, I guess I have to bug her and get her on here as well, so we can get an update because I didn't even
Yeah,
know that she had got a full ride. So I got to get caught up with her. But I want to say thank you for sharing your story and taking the time and just being here and look forward to continue to build our families and friends as we've been doing. And I want to thank everybody who has well, hey, you got to let people know how they can follow you. So
of course.
go
Yep,
ahead.
yep. So Instagram is my thing now. So and staying in touch with the boating theme, it's PNW, like Pacific Northwest underscore whaler, like Boston whaler boat. PNW underscore whaler. Yeah, if you want to get some good boat content, that's where to find and occasional Nate Robinson. So
And they, every now and then, but boats for sure. So,
for
hey, I
sure.
want to thank everybody for taking the time on a Friday night to join live at Unscript and my good friend Shane to talk about his story. And I will be back tomorrow. Tomorrow, I have Jawan Winesberry, who's a former teammate of mine, and he's going to talk about his book, Unbreakable Spirit. And I think that's going to be another good story. Like I said, inspirational, just understanding how to fight when you want to give up. Instead of giving up, what life has that tendency where it will break you, but what do you do? How do you continue to keep going? And so tomorrow I'll be back uh, at I think 8 o'clock. So until then, I am the ambassador, and I want to say thank y'all for taking the time and go make sure y'all follow my man Shane on Instagram. He has some great boat pictures. Trust me. All right, Shane. Thank you. I'm gonna definitely be in touch with you.
Thank you. It's been a privilege. I appreciate you sharing the message.
You're welcome, and thank you, sir. Good day.